Okay, so day 5. Yesterday we talked about macronutrients on a vegan diet and how they compare to a typical sort of diet. And today I'm going to talk about micronutrients, because again this is something that comes up for quite a few people but where do you get your iron, where do you get your calcium, all those sorts of things. So as I mentioned yesterday, when I entered my food into the nutrition app, my iron intake for that particular day was a little on the low side. And so that's something that you probably do need to be a little bit mindful of when you're eating a vegan diet, is to make sure over the course of a week that you are eating foods that are higher in iron. So the non-heme iron is what in plants compared to the heme iron that's in animal tissue. And the non-heme iron is considered to be more difficult to digest. The things that you can do to increase your absorption of iron are actually to eat smaller amounts over numerous meals rather than a huge amount in one sitting, because your body becomes more efficient at absorbing the iron that way. You can eat your iron-rich foods with a source of vitamin C. So that's doing things like having beans and rice with some salsa, or squirting some lemon juice on your greens. And so that's going to increase your absorption of your iron in those foods. Making sure you do eat a variety of iron-rich plant-based foods over your week. So that's things like quinoa, beans, legumes, even nuts and seeds and vegetables like broccoli are all good sources of iron. And also cooking in a cast iron pan can increase your the amount of iron in your food as well. There's a great article on that on the website No Meat Athlete. That's a really excellent resource for everything to do with a plant-based diet, so check that out. So that's iron covered. Calcium, so that's something that a lot of people really worry about when they're thinking about going vegan or thinking about raising kids on a vegan diet is, but we can't not drink cow's milk, I'm not going to get enough calcium. Well, to start with, that's ridiculous. Cow's milk is not a food that's designed for humans in the first place. It's designed for baby cows. And so, yes, it's a perfect food for growing a huge animal, but it's not what humans are designed to have. And when I actually looked into the calcium in dairy products and what that does to our body, when you're drinking dairy or eating dairy-based products, it actually makes your body go into an acid state. And when your body's in an acid state, the body's all about homeostasis and balance, and it's trying to keep everything in check all the time. And so if you're eating a food that's making your blood more acidic, your body instantly wants to alkalize that and balance it. And it does that by pulling calcium out of your bones. And so sure, you might be taking in a food that when it's analyzed, it's high in calcium, but when that food gets into your body, it's not providing you with a source that you can assimilate and use. It's actually pulling your calcium stores out of your body. And you can see the evidence of this when you look at studies that compare diets high in animal products like dairy compared to, say, the traditional diet of Japanese people that's very low in dairy. And you look at the osteoporosis rates in those two populations, and osteoporosis in the dairy-based diet is surprisingly much higher than the osteoporosis rate in a diet that's very low in animal products and has almost no dairy in it. So dairy is not a good source of calcium. Just throw that out the window. It's totally not. And as I said, when I entered my foods into the nutrition app yesterday and had a look at was I meeting all of my micronutrient requirements, calcium was totally, it was a little bit over 100%. So it's easy. Throw a few nuts and seeds into your foods. Broccoli, almonds, those kinds of foods are really high in calcium, so make sure you're eating those on a regular basis. What else? So B12, I'll cover B12 in a little bit more detail in the next video, but again, when I entered the foods into the nutrition app of a typical standard diet versus what I eat in a day, I actually met my B12 requirements, and that was on a relatively high fruit, high raw day, whereas the standard diet was only about 75 to 77% of the recommended B12 requirement. So the diet that had bacon and eggs for breakfast, a veggie lasagna for lunch, and I think I entered a beef stroganoff for dinner, didn't meet the B12 requirement. And so that's something that you need to be aware of. If a lot of vegans are really aware of B12 and supplementing B12, but people that aren't vegan don't even think about it. And actually, you're probably not meeting your B12 requirement on a standard diet. So, and B12 deficiency is something that is chronic. It doesn't show up quickly. It sort of shows up over time, and it can cause lots of sort of different random diseases that potentially seem unrelated, like things like multiple sclerosis have been linked to B12 deficiency. So something to look into. We do supplement B12, even though when I entered my food into the system I was meeting my targets that day. It is something that can be considered to be low, so we do take a B12 supplement. I give the kids a sublingual spray most days. It's a 500 milligram spray, and Ben and I take a sublingual tablet that's a 2000 microgram tablet a couple of times a week. Omega-3s and omega-6s is another interesting one. So people bang on about fish oil and, take fish oil when you're pregnant, make sure you grow your baby's brain and all of that stuff. And personally, I don't want to be contaminating my body with foods that are essentially a concentrated source of plastic byproducts and heavy metals, because that's what ends up in fish. Our oceans are so contaminated these days, and fish pretty much just concentrated into their tissues. And so if you're taking a fish oil supplement, or if you're eating seafood on a regular basis, it's quite possible that you're actually really toxic. You're high in heavy metals, and you've got dioxins and stuff floating around in your body. So I don't think that's a great idea. When you look at omega-3s and omega-6s, it's the balance of the omega-3s and the 6s that's important. And if you're eating a diet that's high in omega-6s, you need more omega-3s to balance that out. And a typical standard diet is actually quite high in omega-6s, particularly if you're eating meats, and especially if you're eating more intensively farmed meats. So that's like your typical chicken, that's even the free-ranging ones that can be considered free-range just because it's in a massive barn and has limited access to the outdoors. And so that sort of meat, or your feedlot cows, or your dairy meat byproducts, veal, that sort of stuff, are all going to be really high in the pro-inflammatory omega-6s. So what I mean by that is omega-6 actually contributes to inflammation in the body. Omega-3s, papaya is a great source of omega-3s. Omega-3s actually reduce inflammation in the body, and so that's why the balance is important. So if you eat a lot of omega-6s, yes, you need more omega-3s, but if you're eating a plant-based diet, then you're not eating a huge amount of omega-6s in the first place, and so there's a lower requirement to balance that out with omega-3s. And so again, that's not something that I worry about. I eat a lot of papaya. It's one of my favourite fruits. Papayas have a perfect amount of omega-3s for our body, and so I know that I'm meeting my micronutrient targets for that one. So they're probably the main ones that come up most frequently, and I'm at a point now with our diet that I just don't really think about it anymore. We eat such a wide variety of foods. We're always eating the rainbow. Most of our food is whole foods, unprocessed, colourful, vibrant, full of life. I do try and eat a lot of raw, or at least sort of 50% raw, as much as possible. And so the foods are so micronutrient dense that it's not something that I concern myself with too much anymore. As I said, we do supplement B12, and that's the main one that I think everybody needs to be mindful of, not just vegans. So I hope that helps. I hope that helps put some concerns to rest with regards to, but am I going to get everything I need if I go vegan, or if I start eating more of a plant-based diet? Well, yes, it's quite likely that you're actually going to get more of what you need. Vitamin C is another great example. You're going to get huge amounts of vitamin C just by eating plant-based foods, whereas if you're eating a diet high in animal products, your vitamin C intake is going to be really low. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Sign up for Veganuary if you haven't already. Try it out yourself and see how it feels to you. And if you've got any questions or comments, just post them below. Thanks.